Good afternoon, Harlem and Harlems of the world. I am Terri Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News. Harlem Network News is a new media platform. We started at the onset of COVID, and we are still here. We knew it was really important. This is a project I've been thinking about for a while. I'm a Harlem entrepreneur, and my background is in film and television. But at the onset of COVID, when folks were walking around Harlem and saying, I'm Black, I can't get it, because they did not see themselves in the media, I knew like we had to just jump in the deep water, and we have taken it from there. We really bring a lot of news and information that doesn't get seen on mainstream television. And we're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, do newsletters. And we know that knowledge is power. And with what we do, we're not doing just a 2-minute sound bites. We're really trying to assure that people are informed and then they move to action. So very critical, as everyone knows, we have a lot going on in our community. Violence, murders every day, police killing us killing us. And for me, this is personal. November 5th, 2021, I lost my son, who was 43 years old on the Shinnecock Reservation. So I've always been doing the work, but now the work's always been personal, but it's more personal. So we need to move forward and stand strong and, just get rid of all the disparities and address them, face them, and deal with them. So my prayers are with all that there have been losses, and there are losses every day in every way. Today, we really have some extremely powerful, iconic people. And there's a play that's happening right in New York City, and it's at the Theater of the New City, First Avenue. The play started on the 9th, and I believe it's continuing until the 26th. And the author of the play is the iconic, the renowned Ishmael Reed. And it's got a body of work, a lifetime of work. I had the honor of just going to a book signing, ironically, with the great late Ed Bradley when I was 17 years old. And, his work is profound. So at 17, I was there and I was with my yellow back radio broken down, and I was really trying to decipher and get it. But obviously that was a path I was to go on. And here we are. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I'm here with Ishmael Reed. I'm also here with one of the stars of the show, and that is in the person of Brian Anthony Simmons. So, Brother Ishmael Reed, if you would just introduce yourself to our Harlem and Harlems of the world, and let people know who you are and whose you are, and then we'll move to what brought you to this profound and prophetic play. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and grew up in Buffalo, New York, and tried my hand at writing in high school. And also, I was what you might call a printer's devil under the great A.J. Smitherman, who was the hero of the Tulsa riots of 1921.
Wow.
And he believed in armed self-defense. And so while people who talk about that riot, and have made films about it, say it was an assault on the Black neighborhoods by a white mob and the state, it was actually an uprising against police brutality and lynching, because A.J. Smitherman was a crusading young editor of the Tulsa Star and was opposed to lynching. And as a matter of fact, he and his men interrupted lynchings, armed. And at one lynching, he interrupted a lynching unarmed by himself. Some bad guys. And so I didn't know his history because he's being wanted by the authorities in Oklahoma until I left town. But I started writing for the newspaper at 16. I wrote a jazz column, didn't know what I was talking about.
Okay.
And then when he died, I came back and worked for the Star under Joe Walker, who was 27, I was 21 or something like that.
Wow.
We took on police brutality and segregation, all that kind of stuff. And it was during this a tenure at the Empire Star that I met Malcolm X.
Ah, okay.
And Malcolm X really turned me on to Black history because I didn't know anything. I was being trained to be an Anglo, a facsimile or amateur European, as I call it.
Mm-hmm.
I knew nothing about Black history, but he's the one who turned me on to Black history and to the possibilities of New York. Joe Walker, when the paper folded, Joe Walker went to work for Muhammad Speaks. I went to New York to become a writer because I was so naive. At the time, in my 20s, I said, well, somebody said, if you want to be a writer, go to New York. And I was successful in New York. As a matter of fact, I got my first novel published when I was 29 or 28 or something like that. Freelance Pallbearers, which is still in print. And so I was going along writing novels and poetry and all that kind of stuff. And I told Carla that I was going to try something easy, like the theater, take a vacation. Well, I got into a quagmire, all right. I think theater is the hardest of the art forms, next, maybe jazz and theater, because there's so many variables and anything can go wrong. If I'm writing a novel, it's like a solitary activity, but if you're writing for the theater and you're collaborating. So my first play, the leading actress fell out on the stage and had to be rushed to the hospital. Oh. And my director was arrested for drug possession. A drunken cop thought well, I told these guys, not to use real guns. I mean, that was a problem. These are people from Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana. So they wanted to use real guns. I said, why don't you use stage guns? No, we're going to use real guns, man. And so the cop arrested him. And as a matter of fact, it went to trial. And he had the stage money. And the cops said, well, that's stage money. You're just trying to deceive another drug. So, I mean, it was a mess. So I said, this theater is harder than I thought it was going to be. So I've written about 11 plays since then. And they've all been done at the Black Rep group in the Berkeley here. And they've been done, as a matter of fact, I was commissioned. Adrian Kennedy, great playwright, whose Ohio State Murders just closed on Broadway, came to me and told me that the director of the Black Repertory Theater at the time wanted me to write a play about the crack crisis in the inner city here in Oakland. And she was the late Nora Vaughn, who's she and her husband were chased out of Alabama, one of those places, for doing militant plays. And the Klan attacked their home and almost killed her daughter, who now directs Mona Vaughn Scott, who now directs the Black Repertory Theater. So I wrote a play called Hubba City, and it was quite different from the stuff you see on TV, where you got all the the whole thing's about Black distribution. These are dangerous series like Power and all of them, because it convinces young people that there's money to be made on the distribution end. No, there's no money to be made on the distribution end. The supply end is where the money is made. The people who are importing the drugs, that's where the money is made. And so all this violence in Chicago and other places is over drug turfs, turf wars over, and that's happening in Oakland. I live in the inner city here for 40 years. So I see the stuff up close. As a matter of fact, there's been exchanges of gunfire on my street. I had to tell my wife and daughter to keep shopping because the coast is not clear. So that was my first play. And since then, I've challenged the official version on down to, let me mention the last play, The Slave Who Loved Caviar. The official version is that here was this waif or this orphan who needed to be taken care of, Basquiat, and here comes this benevolent uncle and Christ-like figure, Andy Warhol, who took him under wing. Well, I did it from Basquiat's point of view. Basquiat said that Warhol was lazy, that he did all the work in that collaboration, exploited by art dealers. Like one of them went to jail, as a matter of fact. One of his brokers recently went to prison for fraud, tax fraud. And I tried to give another story about how all these vampires were taking all of his energy. And first of all, the Warhol Foundation tried to sue me. because of a poster I did where I took liberties, just as Warhol did. He was a plagiarist. He's in court right now for plagiarism.
Okay, all right.
So I took his picture of Basquiat wearing on his jockstrap. I'd seen a painting by Basquiat which says leeches, parasites. And so I put leeches all over his body and put Warhol's face inside each leech. Warhol Foundation, they went crazy. And then one of the people who exploited him, contested her portrayal in the play, which I had sourced. I mean, I had footnotes and did all the research. And so that's the reason that it didn't come back to New York. It's supposed to come back to New York in December. So in the meantime, this controversy out here about the school board, which is going all over the nation, where they're trying to eradicate Black culture. That's the bottom line. I mean, they're not kidding anybody. I don't know if I've studied Native, as a matter of fact, I'm a member of a Native American tribe up in Alaska.
Okay.
Native American in your tribe. I know that one of your elders, I interviewed him for my Muhammad Ali.
Okay.
So anyway,
Cherokee.
Yes.
Okay.
You know that the cultures of some Native American tribes were exterminated because they want everybody to be anglicized. So the school system that we have now is like the old Indian school model, where you have to give up your traditions, your culture, or you be punished. That was the old Indian school, and we still use that model. So that's my play is about these two brave women out here, Gabriela Lopez and Allison Collins.
Thank you.
Who tried to make it possible for Black and Latino parents to get their students into a good school. That was their goal. There was a big backlash. And my play is about how some minorities, like this, one of the people who led the recall movement against them was of Indian origin. He's an immigrant. He's not a citizen.
And East Indian origin.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a new model minority who are providing some, because I have Indians who enlightened, who came to the play and who consulted. For example, I had a piece about how scandalous, how about Mahatma Gandhi's scandalous behavior. I cut that out because, I got advice from the Indian community, other Indian intellectuals, but there's some who are being used to act as a buffer between Blacks and the ruling class. And this is what happened in San Francisco, where they used a Indian immigrant named Siva Raj to start this recall movement. And this recall movement would not be succeeded without these right-wing billionaires who are behind it, okay? And so that's the premise of the play. I was trying to give another opinion, another point of view about Allison Collins and Gabriela Lopez, who've been hounded. Even after they recall, they're still getting death threats. They threatened to—
And they were just, for clarification, I think it's so powerful. And this is Harlem Network News. I'm Terri Wisdom. I am here with the very renowned Ishmael Reed, playwright, novelist, musician, published all kinds of papers, so many things. But we're here with Brian Anthony Simmons, who is one of the stars of the play that's right now in the theater in New York. And very, very important what you're saying in terms of you doing work that is reflective of things that are happening in our society. And
well, we do what other people leave out.
Okay, I love it. But I love the fact that this thing that has happened, you wrote a play about it and it's already out here. And it's almost like it's current news.
Well,
that's powerful.
Let me back up here. I did The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda because the idea that he was an ardent abolitionist was a lie. All hell broke loose. We got hundreds of replies and vilification about, I didn't know what I was talking about. And, I'm trying to be relevant or whatever. And then finally, the New York Times came out and said the guy was a slave owner. And he provided documentation. But still, damage has been done. Thousands of copies of that play has gone to school children. So we challenged that. Then with the Slave Love Caviar, we challenged the official line about Warhol and Basquiat's relationship, which makes this thing on Broadway, the collaboration, a travesty. It's all wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And now we're challenging the position that the people are holding against Gabriela Lopez and Allison Collins. So this whole thing about, they try to rename the high school. Well, some of those high schools should be renamed.
Absolutely.
You go to school and you got Junipero Serra, who turned California into a brothel for Indian women, and put Indians in slavery, Native Americans in slavery, and they made this man a saint. They made him a saint. And then they got this school named after George Washington, who enslaved Black women. Then you got all these other schools that are named after killers, Native American killers, and Black enslavers. So those names should be changed. See, so anyway, we stayed our position, and we got a multicultural cast. Now, Carla Blank is accustomed. She's a master of the theater who's working with people like Robert.
Okay, I love it.
She did a play in Ramallah with an all Assyrian and Palestinian cast. She did my play in China, went to China, whipped my play and had all these Chinese actors speaking English, these long monologues. Brian knows how to write these long monologues. You had the Chinese speaking these long monologues. And so this is a multicultural cast. We have Pakistani, Indian, Filipino, American, Black, Brian and others, and white actors. And this is a solid play. And Brian is the star.
Okay. So let's hear from the star. Brian, what do you have to say? What's this experience been like being in the play, The Conductor? Give us your slant on it and how you came to be in the play, and a little bit about who you are and whose you are. Thank you.
For sure. I think that the exciting thing about doing The Conductor is the exciting thing about being in any conversation with Ishmael. You're going to learn so much within 4 seconds.
Okay.
And then trying to remember all the stuff. There's so many moments in the middle of rehearsal where Ishmael will just oh, you know why I said that? And you go, why? And there's this break moment where he'll give you all these moments in history that are pinpointed to why this relevance is important. So outside of the artistry point, you learn so much just by working with this man, just by being in the same room with him. So it's just very refreshing in that point. It's also refreshing to have really beautiful characters that are written, right? Ishmael writes phenomenal. Carla is a phenomenal director. I was fortunate enough to also be in The Slave Who Loved Caviar as well, where I got to work with them. And so to go from that to this, just knowing how they work and what their process is, and just knowing it was a space of where they were just really trying to, one, challenge those narratives and then create beautiful pieces of art, right? That can stand alone and that really have this weight and girth to them that some people are going to get and they'll understand and they'll like it. And then some people won't, right? But the work is for the people that need to have the work, right? And that's a space that doesn't truly exist very often in theater. So for my selfish actor, artist point, I love that experience continuously, just being able to work with them. So yeah, that also includes how I got to work with them the first time, was in The Slave Who Loved Caviar.
Okay, and I love that title.
Yes, which is really fun also. And I think for me, it's so funny that when we were speaking earlier, you were talking about I think everyone has them when they were 17 years old, coming in contact with the aura of Ishmael Reed. For mine, it was, and Ishmael, I think I told you this before, it was in high school. I remember reading all of my history books. And I remember having this one day where there was this page of my history book where half the page was on the KKK. And then there was a quarter of the page that was comparing the Black Panthers to the KKK as if they were some sort of...
Where did you go to school? Because that's interesting.
Oh, I am from Fredericksburg, Virginia. So, so that is why that page existed that way. Okay. And I
think even here in New York City, we might not even had that page about the Panthers.
Woo.
So that's why I'm asking.
No, this page. I must have lucked out and got that quarter of a page. But I remember that comparison not making sense to me, right? And I remember something not sitting right with me. So that sparks this whole, I guess historical journey for me, where I start reading all these books. And I remember the first 2 books that I picked up just randomly on like these bookshelves were Rage and Soul and Ice.
Okay.
And like as I'm reading Soul
Classics for
and Ice,
everybody.
yeah. I'm reading Soul and Ice, and I'm like, oh, this forward's written by some guy named Ishmael Reed. This is pretty well done. And I remember that, right? And then for some reason that sat in my head, like this Ishmael Reed. Why does his name hold in my head? And then when we first started doing Slave Full of Caviar, I remember being like, this can't be the same Ishmael Reed. So I remember going back to the book and like looking at the forward again and be like, nah, this can't be him. It's just the same name. Brian is just the same name. But then I did a long like
classic name.
Yeah, right. It has to be. It has this like Tom. It's so common, right? So then I like spent like an hour on Google, like a scientist, like, comparing all these images and like timelines and all this stuff to finally realize that it was the same Ishmael. So for me, like just that one moment of like realizing that to really understand the magnitude and the greatness of this individual was shocking to me. And then every time he tells a story, it's so casual how Ishmael, you be throwing out these names like, yeah, I was hanging out with Malcolm X and da-da-da-da. Like, Ishmael, you can't like, you gotta like preface us. And then like you realize that there is something about like the rooms that people are invited into says a lot about the character of that person, right? So
Well
like
said.
having this conversation and having this conversation with Ishmael, and talking about all these people, and then noticing like the mutual respect that it goes from these people, and even like in this show talking about bell hooks, and Ishmael casually mentioning like knowing bell hooks. Like, stop it, man. You can't like that's like you can't casually mention that you know these people. So it's just like it's I'm constantly in awe, truly, to be like in the space with Ishmael and with Carla. And even with Tennessee, like I like this entire family, it like makes me be like, I really have to work harder on just like the simple things, because it's beautiful to see, right? And it's beautiful to like be in proximity with.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. This is Harlem Network News. I'm Terri Wisdom. I'm here with the iconic Ishmael Reed and with Brian Anthony Simmons. And we are talking about a play, The Conductor, that is right here in New York City at Theater of the New City. It opened on March 9th, and we encourage everyone to come and see it. And I think there's a lot to what you said, Brian, that the rooms that we end up to be in, because just for that brief moment in time, and I was 17, that's a long time ago, but I'll never forget that moment. And I realized that there are those people who are there to help you and move you forward. I didn't know Ed Bradley. He was not like a man, he was 24, but he wasn't trying to like talk to me. It wasn't any of that. He was just trying to make sure that I was included and that I got some knowledge. You know what I'm saying? And that's a powerful thing. And then right after that, I went to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, one of the first HBCUs. And my classmate and a close friend who also taught us a course was Gil Scott-Heron. You know what I'm saying? So you can't, it happens in your life. Like you said, it's people in the room and they make a profound difference in your life. And the 6 degrees or the 1 degree of separation, and I could say for Black people, but it also may be people that are on that similar frequency. They just come together. So I was really honored. I want to salute Rome Neal and all the work that he does. And, I believe I saw him at the Adelcos, but something made him call me, just yesterday and say, hey, so it's all works together. And even when you, Ishmael, spoke about Malcolm X and meeting him and that impact, I mean, our show last Sunday was with Malcolm X's youngest daughter, Malak Shabazz. And she was really speaking about the power of her mother, but speaking about her father. And that's a heavy thing as well, because she is one of the twins. She lost her sister last year, but she was not born. Her mother had to lay her body across her sister's. She was born after her father transitioned. So that's a heavy thought and a heavy burden in life to carry. And, you know, she looks very much like him when you look in her eyes. So there's a lot of power. It's also powerful, Ishmael Reed, that you come out of Buffalo, you know, where we just had a whole nother circumstance. And there are greats like Imhotep Gary Bird that comes out of Buffalo.
Yeah,
So
I wrote a piece about Buffalo.
okay.
In the New York Review of Books about, I think it appeared a couple months ago. Growing up in Buffalo and the political situation there, which is not so great.
So I think it's just amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about the story, The Conductor? I know that it's about the school board and people being removed from the school board, and that's a heavy thing right now in our time as books are being pulled. And you know, I was talking to a young person as well, and he didn't know who Malcolm X was. So, you know, and somebody who was 17 that didn't know who James Brown was. So we have a lot of work to do. So the work that you're doing is important. But the whole concept.
You have Irish American students who don't know about the Great Famine.
Yeah.
Italian American students who don't know about Italian American history in this country. They want to make us Anglos. I think that our being members of one ethnic group is the way to success or the way to get over. So that's why the curriculum in this country is so poor. It doesn't cover Africa. It doesn't cover South America. It doesn't cover China. It doesn't cover India. And it only covers a few countries in Europe. Europe many times since I was 17. And I'm amazed at the way Europeans look at their cultures and the way Americans do. And I'm in contact for many years with a Swiss scholar named Sam Luger, who says that Western civilization is something they teach in American schools, and it sees us as a monolith, and we're not. We're all different countries. So that's the reason why we're always getting in these wars, because we are concentrated on one idea, one group, and don't know anything about the world. And so the corporate media and the school education system, they collaborate to keep Americans behind a curtain of ignorance. And that's what my play is about. For example, I mentioned that Euclid, the father of mathematics, was an African. He never went to Africa. But when you look at the textbooks, he's painted as a white man. Nobody knows what he looks like. And so this whole myth and this forgery is just creating generation after generation of bigots. Now, let me tell you about the play.
Okay, loving it.
It's hinges upon a hypothetical. The idea that the so-called model minority, or that the group or ethnic group that's favored at any given time in the United States, can always become a scapegoat overnight. This happened to the Italians, this happened to the Germans, this happened to the Japanese.
Yes.
And their fate was contingent upon how America's relation with the countries of their origin was situated. So Benito Mussolini was a hero to Americans. New York Times had very favorable articles about him. Cole Porter had a line in his song, "You're the top, you're Mussolini." That changed overnight when they got into a warfare with Italy, and that put Italian Americans under scrutiny. As a matter of fact, one of my colleagues on a foundation I founded in 1976 called the Before Columbus Foundation, Stassi wrote a book called The Forgotten Interment about how Italian immigrants were placed in camps out here, and there were restrictions placed on the movements of Italians in California. Same thing happened to Germans, same thing, Japanese are put in camps. Okay, so now I have a hypothetical Indian named Shiva Parmar. That's the name.
It's okay.
Monisha Shiva's an actress. She's Indian. She's a Dalit, as a matter of fact. Anyway, I have this hypothetical character who's behind the school board recall. Then all of a sudden, India gets an anti-American dictator who's threatening the country, shoots down an American plane, and the Indians have to leave the country. So this guy who was used by the right wing to recall people on the school board because they're so-called ultra-progressive positions has to hide. And who hides them? A Black character played by Brian, a Black columnist who was fired by a fictional paper called the San Francisco Chrysalis because he supported the school board. So there are ironies upon ironies. He supported 3 people. And so he has to hide this guy. And then it develops from there, but that's my hypothetical. In other words, in the old days, Blacks are passengers on the Underground Railroad, and
Yes.
they're conductors.
Okay, I love it.
Safely to Canada.
Okay, well, that's a powerful flip of the script, and everybody really coming to see your plays and your work has to do their homework. I'm Terri Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News. I'm here with Ishmael Reed, iconic playwright, writer, published many papers, music, and Brian Simmons, who's in the play, who is the star of the play, the actor. But I think it's important, the work that you're doing, in a sense that you're challenging people, you're making people think. And as they hear these different knowledge bases being dropped, and I think it may be a little bit easier, they can Google it, or they can, because a lot of times people hear stuff and they skip over what they don't know and they just keep going, which means they don't get the whole picture. But there's definitely an attack on knowledge.
There's billions of dollars being made on the so-called black-white racial divide.
Mm-hmm.
Plays, Hollywood. I mean, just everybody's getting paid except for, the blasted masses of Black people. But you have an elite in Hollywood and else Broadway and all that. They're making a lot of money. That's not the only racial divide in this country. And so this is look at another racial divide, and it has ironies upon ironies. For example, and let me just say, Brian has appeared in one of my plays, Slave Love Caviar. Emil Guillermo, the Filipino-American and the only West Coast actor, appeared in my first play, Hava City. Laura Robards appeared in Slave Love Caviar. Bonisha Shiva appeared in the Slave Love Caviar, but she also appeared in the Domestic Crusaders, where I got educated, and my education led to this play. I studied Hindi, as a matter of fact. There was
Okay.
a student named Wajat Ali, who's very famous now, but he took my class, and he was here for 3 weeks. And when he came back, that was because of 9/11. When he came back, because of the anti-Muslim hysteria on the West Coast, and he came, I was going to flunk him. I said, "No, I'm going to take you aside." I say, "The way you respond to this propaganda that's coming against Muslims in America and Pakistani Americans is you fight back the way we have. And one of our sources or resources is the theater." And I mentioned Lorraine Hansberry's Raisin in the Sun. I mentioned Death of a Salesman. And I mentioned it's like in church when you get Irish actors doing Long Day's Journey into Night. So I write a family play. And he read those plays, and I said, "You give me 20 pages. So he gave me, and I say, "I'm not," after he graduated, I said, "I'm not finished with you." He said, "Well, I don't know no plays." I said, "Look, I'll turn you over to Carla Blank, a master of the theater, my spouse, right?"
Okay.
2 years, they came up with the Domestic Crusaders. And the play started out in a restaurant in Fremont, California. If you pay $10, you can get a meal and you see the play. We thought a few people show up, 400 people showed up, people with baby and stuff.
Wonderful.
I sponsored it at the Berkeley Rep. Then I went to New York, and now it's a classic called The Domestic Crusaders. But my acquaintance, my familiarity, or my being introduced to this Pakistani American community led to this play, because it got me interested in Hindi and the Southeast Asian mythology and storytelling.
I think that's extremely powerful, because I think one of the things that's really important, especially here, and especially for Black people, people of color, we need to recognize that it is a very big world. And because our history has been kept from us, we really have been hindered, you know, even in terms of regular news. And we do have on our site, BBC Africa, so that people can get the information. But we're being bombarded with what's happening in Ukraine. You know, meanwhile, there are all kinds of atrocities and different things going on in Africa. You know, Africa is the gold mine of the world, you know, so it's really, really important that we broaden those horizons. And one of the blessings in New York City or in Harlem is that we have a lot of different people coexisting in a lot of different ways. And everybody may not always get along, but we know these people. You know, it's kind of like, you know, we have what we call our bodegas, but our bodegas, which is a Spanish thing, are mostly run by Arabs, you know. And I remember when Trump was elected, there were 15-year-old twins, and I'm skipping what country they're from. But, you know, I would go in there every day to get a tea or get a something or whatever. And so, you know, I would always talk to them. They were young people in school. So, you know, I would build that relationship. And when Trump got elected the next day, they were asking me, because they were saying, because remember, he was saying things about we all, you know, people need to get out the country or what's going to happen. And they were like, well, we're going to go back to our country. And then they asked me, and they were very serious. They were like, well, where are you going to go? And, you know, they were concerned, you know, as to where now that Trump's been elected, I was going to go, you know, because they kind of understood, they knew they had a country to go back to, but they didn't know if I had one. So I think there are deep relationships, bonds, and information that can happen. I will ask, you can respond, please. Thank you.
I think that a lot of people are startled when they do their DNA and find out they got third and fourth white cousins. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Not startled.
Much news about that. Now, we have this DeSantis running around here trying to be accepted by the Anglo Club, right? So I have an Italian next door neighbor, and she did her DNA, and Bantu, Congo, and all these places showed up.
Of course, the Moors.
I run DeSantis, and I wanted to run to the right of DeSantis. I would ask him for his 23andMe results.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I love it. I love it. I love it. Brian, how did you get into the whole acting and just, you know, connect with Mr. Reed? How did that happen?
I got into acting through like a very childish moment of rebellion. When I was in the 6th grade, my mother wanted me to do band, right? And I had no interest in doing band. So at the time, she was like, all right, you either have to try out for the saxophone or the clarinet, because we already had a saxophone and a clarinet in the house, and she wasn't going to buy another instrument, right?
Okay.
So I went in. That was logical, right? I went in and I auditioned for the trumpet, and I got it. So I went home and I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I got the trumpet. And her exact response was like, well, since you don't listen, now you have to do electives. And I decided I was going to take what I believed to be the 2 easiest electives. So I picked shop class, which I failed miserably because I do not know how to build things. And then I picked drama, which I fell in love with. And since the 6th grade, I have been doing that nonstop, to be honest with you. And I was fortunate enough to be connected with Ishmael Reed because of some of my work with Rome Neal and Crossing Paths in there.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Ishmael, can you speak a little bit, because I know that, you know, at least from what I've read, you taught at, I guess, Boston University, Yale. Where are some of the other places, and what are some of the courses that you taught? Because as I was preparing for this interview, and this is Terri Wisdom, Harlem Network News, you know, I'm reading and I'm just trying to get myself acclimated. And then I was like, well, we need a whole course in what you've done. You know, there needs to be a course. And then I, you know, read a little further that you taught. So where have you taught and what do you teach?
Well, I taught at, excuse me, I taught at the University of California, Berkeley for 35 years.
Okay.
And was voted Emeritus of the Year last year.
Love it.
I thought was a high honor. And now I'm distinguished professor at the California College of the Arts, where I've
okay.
had classics like Margaret Walker's great novel, which is just underrated. I think if she lived in New York, she would have gotten a big prize, but she stayed in Mississippi. That was her problem. And at the great notoriety, though, that book should be taught in tandem with.
Would you just say it again so people hear and get it? Which book is it?
Jubilee.
Okay.
It's a Black family from slavery to emancipation and beyond. And it took 30 years of research by Margaret Walker to write this book. She also won the Yale Prize for her poem, For My People. So Margaret Walker's book, I was able to read, sentence to sentence, and Baldwin's novel that got him ousted from the New York literary establishment. A lot of people, that's why you don't hear very much about it.
Okay.
Tell me how long the train's been gone. I was very upset about his treatment by the actor studio, Lee Strasberg and people like that. And so what did he do? He satirized them mercilessly in this novel. He felt that they had toned down his play, Blues Mr. Charlie. He was the favorite darling of the literary establishment, the so-called family. But after he insulted members of the family, they got Mario Puzo to do the hatchet job on him in the New York Times Book Review, which recently has been subjected to an analysis, a statistical analysis showing that they can only tolerate one Black writer at a time, okay? And so I was able to investigate books like that. I recently wrote the introduction to the Library of America's edition of The Man Who Cried Am, one of the great novels of the 1960s. And I'm trying to restore the reputation of William Denby. I published 2 of his books. And finally, his final novel, he couldn't find a publisher in the United States. I published that, and that's led to a William Denby renaissance. William Denby was a writer who stayed in Italy after the war. He was a soldier. He married a Italian woman who was a script writer, and he wrote scripts for Rossellini and Antonioni and all these Italian filmmakers. And he wrote a great novel as a result of that called The Catacombs. And this is ironic. I should mention this. This is very amusing and ironic.
Okay, thank you.
World War II. And then after the war, he found himself cavorting with Hitler's mistresses.
Whoa.
Because he's a beautiful young guy, at the time. And he played saxophone with Mussolini's son, who played jazz. Yeah, I know. So I said, this is crazy.
It's a big world.
United States in 1968, and he wrote Love Story Black, which I published, and finally he wrote King Comus, which Carla Blank, my wife, edited with Melanie Shirazi, and now there's a Denby Renaissance, and I think that a recent issue of the Times last month had a picture of the cover of Catacombs as a William Denby as a neglected writer. So I think that this is what I've learned. I went to New York to become a writer.
Okay.
New York in 1967. So 2 of my best decisions I made was to go to New York and to leave New York. Is that they put these divas and divos on us. And the purpose is to smother all the great writing of a particular generation. So instead of us having 1 and 2 writers, a whole generation of excellent writers should be recognized. And that's what we try to do on the West Coast.
Okay. I think that's very empowering in terms of the New York space and the California space. In some ways, I know that Harlem and Oakland are kind of sister brother cities. Right. And kind of bring out the same kind of energy and the same kind of people. So it's very interesting. And then it's interesting as you speak about Cal Arts, I have a friend who attended Cal Arts, and at that time, it could have been about 40 years ago, for racial reasons, at that time, she wasn't able to handle it. Right. And then she ended up to leave and go to Howard and be part of their fine arts department. But in fact, her brother, who's younger than her, did Cal Arts. So, you know, we all find our places and we all find our spaces, but we know that a lot of our stories are suppressed and consequently we become suppressed. So it's about breaking out of that suppression and the colorism, you know, that happens across the board. You mentioned it in the Native American, and someone was saying, my brother, Wayne T. Duncan, has a Native American group, the Youngblood Singers, and they travel all over the country. And he's done a lot of research, but it's like the color of the Native Americans started out pretty dark. And now when you see it, it's a whole nother thing. And we know that there's mix and mingle of everybody. And even among the East Indians, when you look at that, there was a Mississippi Masala, you know, so there's a lot of colorism. And even growing up, when they would teach us about the untouchables, I didn't really know that most of the untouchables were the Black ones, you know, so.
Well, so one of the actors in the play, Monisha Shiva, is a Dalit. And she talks about the situation of Dalits in India. Mm-hmm. So what happens, ironically, is that while her brother, the right winger, has to go to Canada, being dark skinned, she passes for a Black American. I say, as Brian says, that's a new one. Pass. So a lot of variety and I think it has a lot of depth in this play. And we've gotten very good responses so far to the play. And people can still see it, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 7. Excuse me, 8.
8, yes, I was going to say 8. And that's at the theater for the New City, which is located right at 155 First Avenue.
Also streaming, so people can see it online.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Okay, so that's wonderful. That's wonderful that it's also streaming and people can see it, because that's a very helpful thing. I mean, we know we're in the technical revolution, but there are some good things if it's used properly.
And we say it because I've composed all the music and play it.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Because I kind of glossed over the music thing. But can you tell us a little bit, we're going to move forward shortly, but a little bit about this music and composing. Obviously, you are possessing genius in many, many, many levels.
I got to tell it to my relatives because they're all calling themselves geniuses after neighbors, you know, everybody's a genius. But anyway, if you go to Reading Group, READING, GROUP, you'll see my new CD. Carla's on it too. And it's called The Hands of Grace. And it's dedicated to Grace Bonner, the fashion designer in London, who flew to play for her fashion show, you know. So that's why it's called The Hands of Grace, but it's at Reading Group in New York, readinggroup.com, and it's called The Hands of Grace, the new CD. Our former CD is For All We Know, and it features David Murray, the great saxophonist.
Okay. Do you play as well, or sing, or any of the other aspects? Or
I play, you know, as much as I can, the piano, and I compose. It's not in, you know, a virtuosity, but harmonies. Different
harmonies. Okay. Well, it's a busy world. It's a great life. I'm inspired. Brian, do you want to give any closing thoughts, remarks, what's next? And also, how do you see, you know, just being in a different generation, people responding to the play? What's the response?
The response that I'm seeing, I love history, right? So for me, like, I'm always like gonna be anything history related, I'm always in love with to begin with. But the response I'm seeing is I was concerned because it's so, like, when you watch the show, I will talk for like 20 minutes straight.
Okay.
You know, gave me a lot of monologues. And I was worried at first about that, like people not being able to follow it, just because there's so much information hitting you at once. But the beauty of like, it's so much information, but it's so beautifully written that it's like in bite-sized chunks for you to kind of take and hold on to, right? There's also like such like intentional usage of repetition that you don't even realize it's the same information you've heard or like slightly the other version of it.
Okay.
Kind of sits with you a little bit better. I saw one woman after the show, Friday, I believe, she came up to me and she showed me her program and she had like written down things that she needed to Google search later on that night.
Okay.
Which I thought was beautiful, right? Because you want people to come and see work and like do something with the work afterwards, right? And like spreading that information is what the purpose is, right? We were able to really give these two women, Gabriella Lopez and Allison Collins, like a version of themselves in the media finally that was accurate, right? Where they're fighting so much of it that's not accurate. And I think that was like such a beautiful use of like all these artists coming together, because it showed us that like these artists can put our art together to support people in like the right way and to tell these stories and like create this fictional world that's not too unbelievable, unfortunately. And we kind of see those stepping stones of how it kind of happened. So I have had a ball like doing this show. The response has been amazing. And I think that's it. I think it's really come to see the show and like come to see the show willing and ready to learn. Okay. And just walk away with that, because I think you're going to get a fantastic performance from everyone in the show. It's just doing just beautiful, beautiful work. We had an amazing director that put us in like such a great framework that really all we have to do is like keep it straight. You know what I mean? Okay. In their absence, all we have to do is just do what they told us to do. And then it'll be continuing the show. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's very empowering. It's very inspiring. And it's almost like it's a new type of news. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a new type of news because this happened so recently and now it's a play. And so it's giving people the opportunity. And then I like what you were saying in terms of, and this is Harlem Network News, Terri Wisdom, and I'm here with Ischmael Reed, extraordinaire, and Brian Anthony Simmons. But I think it's very powerful that something that's happening in a contemporary world is now in a play, you know, which gives you a lot more time to deal with it. And I like, you know, what you're saying in terms of it's said and then it's said again, you know, so that people can really take in the information. Right. Because especially now that's key. And there's so much information coming so many ways. And a lot of the information's not even true, but because of how news is, people just, you know, they see it, they hear it, they believe it. And especially for people of color or people from all over or wherever, and for everyone, it's important to seek that truth. Ishmael, Carla Blank's name comes up so many times. She's directing this play. She's your spouse, work partner. You're working on music together. How does that all work? How does that balance come? This meeting of the minds and soul?
Well, you know, I think we motivate each other, and we all come from working class families where, at least in my family, the highest tribute that one could garner was to do a lot of overtime. And so as an artist, I think my siblings look at me as being like laid back. You know, I said I had a retirement party because I wanted to convince my mother that I hadn't been goofing off for 35 years.
I hear you.
They felt I was like a soft profession or something. But we both come from working class families in Pittsburgh and in Buffalo. That's one of the reasons I live in Oakland, because Oakland reminds me of Pittsburgh. And
Interesting.
So I think that's it, is that, you know, it's hereditary.
Okay. Well, I am just honored that we are having you all here on Harlem Network News, and we're speaking about the play, which is almost like living news, living history. And I love the fact that so much information comes out in theater and in film that we don't know, in terms of history. And I love what you said about dinner theater, or I don't know if it was dinner theater or but it was food and a play. Mm-hmm. And that's a very powerful thing. We had the honor, at that time I was a part owner in a restaurant, and we did a play called Sugar Ray that won an Adelco and Woody King Jr. Directed it, and it was just so powerful as a one-man show. And Reggie Wilson was the one man, but it was just so powerful because this was living theater. Right. It was, and the restaurant was where Sugar Ray's place was. Yeah, I remember. So it was. I
remember Sugar Ray in his place.
Yeah, so the play took place in there, and Sugar Ray's son, who was dealing with some health challenges, came out of the rehab, and he was the first one there at the show. But there were all these Harlem people who don't normally go to plays, who came there, and everybody had a story. Yep. Somebody's husband had gone to Paris with him, who was a minister at Abyssinia, boom, boom, somebody. They had boxed together. Somebody else had, so that's also the power when you take that theater and put it where the community and the people can get it. And they're hungry for the information.
I have a picture in my study of Sugar Ray standing in front of that pink Cadillac.
Okay. Yep. Yes, and I think
we love Sugar Ray. He was so beautiful.
Yeah, and I think when he went to Paris, I think he had his pink Cadillac shipped over there.
He got beaten up by Randy Turkey. I remember that, partying too much. I also remember he tried to be a dancer.
Yes.
I would see him, hoofing.
Tap dance. So we have many stories, and our stories are valuable. Our stories are important. I thank you, Ishmael Reed, for continuing to tell our stories. And like I said, I'm just honored because that always sticks in my mind because that was such a title, and I'm probably not even saying it right. Yellowback Radio Broken Down.
Well, ironically, the first book that we published was by Steve Cannon and I published in 1974 was by Allison Mills. And they wanted to make her the Black Marilyn Monroe, but she left Hollywood. She couldn't deal with Hollywood. And she wrote a novel about how her husband bought a option to Yellowback Radio Broke Down. And Richard Pryor, who read the book when we were hanging out together in Berkeley, said he wanted to do it. Instead, he took it to the studio that did Blazing Saddles. So Yellowback Radio Broke Down became Blazing Saddles. And her book, her novel, is about they're trying to sell the option, and what Richard Pryor did as a result, which they consider a betrayal. Now, the book is being republished. It has next month by New Directions. It's a classic. William Denby and both Toni Morrison praised the book. So that was the first book, but it's about the situation where the Yellowback Radio became Blazing Saddles.
Okay, so we have it. So we heard it here on Harlem Network News. And in terms of film, what is the film world for you?
We did a film called Personal Problems in 1981, which was remastered by Kino Lorber Company. You can buy a DVD of it, and it's considered a masterpiece. It's Bill Gunn, the great Bill Gunn's last.
Oh yes, Blackula.
No, it's his last. Wow. Hollywood found him too difficult. He left Hollywood. Got him on so-called decline of his career. He worked with Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, and all of them, and Montgomery Clift. And he directed this play, this script. Berta Mae Grosvenor, her.
Yes.
Is a star, and Bill Gunn is there, and we have a number of Black actors. And recently, Vulture of New York Magazine voted it as number 44 of the best films ever done on New York. And we beat out The French Connection, all these films, $1 billion budgets. Okay. And
what's the title of it again?
It's called Personal Problems.
Personal Problems.
Okay. And it was revived by the Metrograph Theater, the movie house. They premiered it a few years ago, and it's gotten excellent reviews. since then. And so it's considered a classic, not only because of the script, but because of Bill Gunn.
Yes. Yeah. Bill Gunn. I had the honor and pleasure to go to WNET Film and Television Training School. So we studied a lot of people. There was a great editor, Kathy Collins, who was Bill Gunn. Yeah, she was one of my instructors. So I just remember.
She translated a voodoo book for me.
Okay.
The Possession of Voodoo by Dr. Louis Mars. She translated it from the French.
Okay, so the world is small. So we're going to close out. Brian, quickly, what about you and the film world?
I just love how Ishmael has a connection to like, this is always my favorite thing about this man. Oh, I love you so much, brother. What's next for me is just continuing. I just finished touring 2 solo shows. So coming off of that and then opening this show, I think we went to like breathe for a while and then just try to figure out what the next one is, the next play or the next audition for something.
Okay, I love that. Breathing is good.
Yeah.
Sometimes they say in the acting world, the freelance world, the film world, no matter how much you do, no matter how big you are, people are like, am I ever going to work again? So I love the breath. I
lived out of a suitcase for like 3 months, so I'm kind of trying to be home and just not do anything. Wow, that's it.
Okay, I love it. Okay, so this has been a robust conversation. Thank you, Rome Neal, for bringing us all together. Ishmael Reed, it's an honor, a trip back to 17 years old. And it's great to meet you, Brian, and I will see you at the show, and Harlem Network News is going to try to get as many people there as possible. I'm going to tell them where to go and everything again, but I want to close out Ishmael because I read something, and this may just be superfluous, but it said, what are the 3 laws in Ishmael?
What's the question again, please?
What are the 3 laws? They said Ishmael has 3 laws, 3 basic rules.
I think that I think it might have been laws. LOA. What is the spelling?
Laws or 3 basic rules.
Oh, I think excuse me. I think find something that you enjoy and be driven. That was the lessons I got from mentors. My mentor first was a Jewish American drugstore owner who founded the modern drugstore chain named Carl Prater. Came to the United States when he was 11 years old from the Ukraine and built, and just was out workaholic. And A.J. Smitherman, who publishes paper, go to sleep while driving. I said, Smitherman, wake up, you driving, man. And just driven. So find something that you like and enjoy and be driven. Okay.
All right. So that's something to be left with. And certainly you have found that and you're sharing that.
I just got a note here that it's the theater for the new city, THEATER, not theater. THEATRE, so it's theater. THEATER.
Okay. So we have Theater for the New City, and the play is The Conductor, and the play is running. I believe it started on March 9th. It's going through March 26th. There are shows on Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 8 p.m. And the Sunday show is at 3. So you still got some time to see it. It's also live stream, and those that know how to live stream, you can probably Google it. The theater's at 155 First Avenue. The tickets are very reasonable, $18. So that's a good thing here in New York City. So check out this play. Research more about the great Ishmael Reed, and we expect to hear and keep hearing from you, Brian Simmons. Thank you, and thank you all for being a part of Harlem Network News. Check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. our newsletters, our website, and support. You know, if you have stories or information, you know, you can call us directly at 646-261-5397, Harlem Network News at gmail.com. You know, reach out if you're able to donate. And donate can be in-kind services. It can be you have a story that nobody's talking about, you know, that you feel people need to know. If you have writing talents, you know, you take articles, you know. So we're grateful to be here, and we will continue to do the work. So thank you. And,
thank you.
Onward, forward ever, backward never. So
Appreciate
have a great day. Have a great day. And I'm sorry, Mr. Ishmael Reed, are you at the show often, or you're in and out? Because I know there was a talk back the first evening with the two women that were on the board. Mm-hmm.
We were there for the first week, and then we came back here.
Okay.
So Rome's in charge, Rome Neal.
Yes. Okay.
If there's any flack, you know, contact with Rome Neal.
I got you. And Rome Neal is a New York icon. So we love it. So thank you so much, and have a blessed day, everybody. And stand firm, stand strong, and knowledge is power. You know that.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.